Well, welcome everybody to our webinar. I'm Barb Howe. I work with the Colorado Department of Agriculture as a business development specialist. And I'm thrilled to have this fantastic group of people joining me today. I'm going to share my screen for just a minute so we can see all of the folks that are joining us. We've got Dr. Don Tamani from Colorado State University's Regional Economic Development Institute. Danielle Trotta could not join us. She had something come up very early this morning, so I apologize. We have Danielle Kitzman. She is the vice president and with the Pueblo Chili Growers Association. And we have Diane Mulligan, the president of M&C Communications, representing the Rocky Ford Growers Association. All of their emails are on the screen if you want to reach out to them later. And of course, I'm Barb, and you can always reach out to me at a later time too if you think of a question after our webinar is over. Just a couple of rules or comments here. If we could mute our microphones when someone is speaking, that would be great. This just eliminates background noise. We really welcome and encourage questions. Raise your hand or type it into the chat and we'll make sure that they are addressed. We will ask for questions after each speaker and again at the end. And again, if you have something you're curious about after the webinar, just reach out to me and I can put you in contact with one of these experts. Excellent. So with that, our webinar today is going to be looking at market data. We did a fantastic survey in 2022 for Ag Perception Survey throughout Colorado, so we'll be touching on that, as well as from our Growers Association representatives, how they're using these data, and how to use it in the marketing of your product. So we'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to turn it over to Dawn. And Dr. Tamani is a professor of agricultural economics and the co-director of the Regional Economic Development Institute at Colorado State University. Her research and outreach focuses on food systems and rural economic development, primarily focused on opportunities related to value-added food product, market supply chains, market access, and financial viability of underserved food enterprises, such as beginning farmers, food consumer behavior, and economic diversification, such as agritourism and entrepreneurship. She is on the Colorado Food System Advisory Council and will help lead the new USDA Northwest and Rocky Mountain Food Business Center. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Tamani, and I turn it over to you.
Thanks much. It's always awkward to have yourself introduced just because you realize that's who you are, but makes me sound far more impressive than I am. And I've enjoyed getting to do some of these in the past, and so nice to see some familiar faces and some new faces. But I'm kind of starting the day with probably the most 100-foot view of what we're going to talk about today, which is your marketing strategy and brand, and using it to share something we actually did here at Colorado State cooperatively, led by the Colorado Department of Ag and your division over there, looking at how the average Coloradan thinks about agriculture, knowing that some of those public perceptions are what we use to just understand if our organizations are doing the right work. But more importantly, they're also kind of some insights into the mind of what's your buying public in Colorado and how you might be able to use that to your advantage as you're developing your market strategy. So to give you a general sense of the survey, which we've done every 5 years for over 30 years now, we did it to kind of just keep a pulse on what Coloradans think about a lot of current issues, including some of the categories you see here. And actually, for not that full 30 years, but in the last couple of surveys, we've added more dimensions about marketing and consumer behavior and motivations, because with the Colorado Proud program, we realized they could be used to help inform both that program and how some of you are marketing here in Colorado. So just give you a sense of the survey, we talked to about over 1,000 people across the state. We actually hired a survey unit to do that this year, representing what Colorado looks like. It was heavily suburban and urban, But we did ask people also, just for some context, if they've ever lived on a farm, if they currently live on a farm, or even if they don't live on a farm, are they doing anything to raise their own food, so that they might have some appreciation of that. And then you'll see on the right-hand side, for those who do live in Colorado, how long they have lived there. And there's a half of the state that is either native or been here long enough to probably consider themselves native. But as we won't be surprised by, and sorry, some of the percentages got knocked off, we have a lot of newcomers to the state. So again, we're kind of interested in, are they as tied and loyal to Colorado as long-term Coloradans? And it turns out they are. So it doesn't matter how long you live in Colorado, there seems to be this Colorado pride we're interested in. So let's share with you a little bit about what we learned in that survey. It turns out, even though we see a lot of other claims out there, organic, natural, animal friendly, it really turns out the highest share of people are far more driven by where their food is grown than how their food is grown. So when we asked about a whole array of claims, and I'll get into these a little bit more deeply, the number one was that the product was grown or raised in Colorado, and number two, they look for the Colorado Proud symbol. So this is great news for our colleagues over at the Colorado Department of Ag who run that program. But one constraint people did note was that they would buy more Colorado products if they were available, branded, and affordable. So we're still having a little bit of that challenge of people being able to find the Colorado products they hope to buy. That's hard to believe in the season where all the farmers markets and farm stands and even corner peach stands are up. But there are still people who feel like it's a little harder to find than they would hope. This is something our food retailers, I hope, pay attention to. And so not surprisingly, when people say when they can find product, more than 90% of them say it's really the farmers markets, farm stands, and CSAs, which stand for community supported agriculture, that they feel are more supportive and where they can find those. And for the first time, we started asking how many people are shopping there, and at least 2/3 of Coloradans shop at one of those kind of markets at least once a year. So they are definitely popular, and that's a number we don't see in all states across the country. To give a shout out to one of our upcoming speakers, and I'll do this. We also know what people's awareness is of different Colorado products. And this year, when we asked, the hands over hands winner was Pueblo chilies, where the growth of awareness and purchasing behavior people noted between this past year, 2022, and 5 years before was exceptionally high, like nothing I've ever seen before in a survey. So it's probably why you're going to hear about Pueblo today. So now these slides are a little bit busier, and so you might just want to look at them once we're posted. But I did want to give you a sense on the left-hand side that there's also things we ask people about what would motivate them to eat more Colorado food and products. And so the higher it is on that chart, the more important that motivation is. We do still have, people want to make sure that the product is safely handled, and that's why we have cottage foods trainings, and we try to make food safety practice training available through Colorado State to everybody who's selling through those markets. We do still have a perception that Colorado products can be pricey and that it might be a little more expensive to buy. They do want to make sure that the producers they're buying from also use sustainable practices when possible, and that what they're buying actually has economic benefits to Colorado. And we'll come back to that in a little bit. So there are some ways, if you're thinking about developing your marketing strategy or the language you use and the scripts you use when you're talking to your customers, those motivations to the left-hand side might be things you'd want to consider about how you'd frame your product. If you look at those across time, we also ask people who might motivate you to do better things. So Colorado chefs, of course, show up there. But what you can see at the bottom right is the motivations that are changing the most. So where people are getting more interested in them is people really do use labels. You need to have a good labeling strategy. They're looking for farmer rancher connections, whether that's you being at a stand at a farmer's market, you sampling at a store if you're selling through a store, or you having perhaps once a year days that people can come out and visit your farm or ranch. All of those things will help you get some brand loyalty from your customers, it looks like. People are time constrained, so they're looking for more prepped and ready-to-eat foods. That is a challenge for a lot of people because that usually means more processing, which not all producers have access to. But for you consumer product good folks, it's great news. They want their jerkies, they want their oat snack bars, They want things ready to eat and put in their lunch pail or on their counter. They do want to understand the economic benefits. So if you're buying from Colorado businesses for your ingredients, if you're hiring Colorado workers, if your farm and ranch is owned fully by Colorado families and farms, make sure that messaging is clear. And again, they want confidence in food safety practices. And I think this is particularly for people going to markets where things are fresh, perhaps easily perishable, and making sure they see good handling practices. So this is where we get to what's going on with our various brands that are popular in Colorado. So on the top right side, which is the easiest, you can see when we ask people about their level of awareness of Colorado products, beer won the day, followed closely by Lay's sweet corn. But you can see a wide array of our products have really, really good brand awareness. So beyond companies, just what Colorado has done to really raise awareness about some of the products we do really well has gone really well. But we still have some stragglers there. Wine and spirits aren't quite caught up with beer yet, although they continue to make progress every year we ask. Colorado lamb, we think, is just a function of the fact lamb in general does not have great awareness among the whole buying public. And then our newest up and comer we put in here because we now have a quinoa processing plant in the San Luis Valley is Colorado quinoa is one of our up and coming products, which we hadn't asked before. But in the lower left-hand corner, beyond knowing how aware people are, we also want to know who's making progress. And this is where we want to highlight the Pueblo chilies. If you look at the first column, which is did you purchase this past year versus 2016, Pueblo chilies almost had double the number of people say that they not just weren't aware of that brand, but that they were buying that brand. And that's a growth rate you rarely see in these surveys, but we actually saw really good growth across a lot of categories. Just the most exceptional by far was Pueblo chilies. And we don't think that's a mistake. We think Pueblo chilies have done a remarkable job of really branding their story well. So let's talk about how you use some of this data I just showed you to actually think about how you would develop your brand strategy. We definitely see amongst our subgroups that there's a really growing urban awareness of Colorado signature products. So I showed you the general statistics, but we also could look at those by subcategories. And those urban area consumers are really paying attention to some of our signature brands across the state. The largest rise was in Colorado lamb and Pueblo chilies between 2016 and 2022. So those are brands that had a lot of growth to make and did an exceptionally good job. But we still see that rural Coloradans are the most aware of what our key products are, probably because they're growing around them. We did dig a little bit deeper about what people meant by local Colorado foods. And all respondents said, obviously, they prefer that it's grown or if it's animals raised in Colorado. For rural areas, they wanted it even closer. They wanted just to be not Colorado. They wanted to be their county or really close to where they live. And then for suburban and urban folks, they want it produced in Colorado and if possible within 100 miles of where they live. Knowing, of course, again, if you're going to get a Lay's sweet corn, it's going to come from over 100 miles away because by definition, a Lay's sweet corn is from Lay. So whether it's branded Colorado or if it needs to be farther than 100 miles, that's where you want to do the things like by branding it Rocky Ford, Olathe, Pueblo. If you think of what their most motivated things are is fresh, safe, and well priced, as I showed before. But if we subdivide the sample a little bit, it's those younger respondents who are most motivated by food prices. And it's older respondents who are most motivated by supporting products that support the economy. They're the ones who you want to have conversations about who you're employing, who it's owned by, that the money is staying in place. Those younger respondents, as you're thinking of a brand strategy, that might be why you want to think about how you would get those younger respondents without changing your whole pricing structure. So, maybe if a consumer, a community supported agriculture, you give a discount for people under 25 just to get them hooked so that when they do get older and make money, they might come back to you and continue spending with you for their lifetime, for example. So again, this is just kind of driving home the fact that this is why we're doing a Colorado Proud-based webinar today. People in Colorado are very, very proud of Colorado. They want the products grown and raised in Colorado, labeled as Colorado Proud, or if it's consumer product good made or crafted in Colorado. And these other production practice designations are popular among some subgroups. They're just not as ubiquitously popular, and there's only parts of the consumer buying public that are looking for those claims, where almost everybody is looking for Colorado Proud. So what does this mean? The whole reason we started asking these questions is way back when we did this survey, and it was more broadly framed and not quite as driven by consumer behavior. We knew every time we asked that, Coloradans told us that it was important to know their purchases support the local economy, and that they now believe that developing local food systems is important to the state's culture and health. And so we certainly here at Colorado State University and with Colorado Department of Ag, because of that, and because people think the markets that best support them are farmers markets, CSAs, and farm stands, it's part of why we have programs to support those focus. And we have done some of our work in actually getting more Coloradans to visit those markets. But I think what we all know is the grand challenge is when it comes down to it, the majority of food dollars are still spent at grocery stores, supermarkets, and those bigger stores, which is what the slide shows to the left, and restaurants. So although I think we've done great work to try to get people to some of those alternative markets, and they are, as you can see on the right-hand side, what consumers perceive is the best places to buy Colorado produce. So the right-hand side shows that Coloradans know that's where to find local foods, but the left-hand side shows they still buy the majority of their food from those other channels. I think our grand challenge is to continue to work together to try to get some of the retailers and restaurants in our state to think about adopting these products using the data I just shared and showing them that they know Coloradans are looking for those products in their offerings, so that although we want our direct markets to continue, and that's why I have the new center we're hosting here, we know the real future is getting people also options to get into those wholesale and resale accounts that the restaurants and stores have, so that the brand can be better. So as I wrap up and turn it over to the rest of these speakers, I guess how I want you to think about how this data can support your 5 Ps of your marketing strategy is to confirm to you that local is a key product differentiating trait in Colorado. A lot of my peers do these in other states, and you almost never see this kind of popularity. It truly does really resonate in Colorado, and that they tell us that labels matter. Make it absolutely clear it's a Colorado product if it's a Colorado product, whether it's using the Colorado Proud bug or even going further than that and sharing as much information as you can about the location you're producing in. Marketing channels matter. Farmers markets and community supported agriculture are great fits, but they do limit your market reach to only the people who will visit those, and they might not visit them as often as a store. So if you're looking to approach retailers and restaurants in the area, please use some of these data points or visuals to drive home to them that you'll help drive sales in their market, because people are looking for those Colorado products. And the Pueblo chili story, which you're going to hear far more about, is proof that targeted and consistent promotion do work with Coloradans. It shows up, and there's no brand I feel like who has been come out of nowhere and done a better job of raising awareness than we've ever seen in these surveys. So with that, I'm turning it over to the rest of the panel who can really drive these stories home. But thank you for your time today.
Excellent job. That was quite a survey and great graphs to show what people really were saying when they responded. Does anybody have any questions for Dawn?
I don't know that I have a question as much as I have a wow, thank you. I'm gonna from the Pueblo
I've never
chili.
set up a speaker accidentally better in my whole life. So I actually didn't know Danielle was going to be right after me. So I made these slides before I knew that. So it was a fortuitous accident. So yeah, good work down there. And it's always the funnest to give a webinar on stuff that's relatively good news. And this survey was really good news for Colorado agriculture.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, I think I'm excited to share it with our community, and to have that kind of that kind of data behind us really resonates, and I'm excited to share that message. So thank you.
I think I saw both John's hand, and then Michelle has her hand raised. So whichever direction you guys want to go.
I'll wait. Go ahead.
Michelle?
Yeah, thank you. Hi, Dawn. How are you? Nice to see everyone.
Good to see you again, Michelle.
Just question, and maybe this is in the more in the details, but did the surveys did you stratify that by geography? Like I'm always asking about the rural communities, right? I feel like a lot of this data resonates up in Northwest Colorado, but I'm just wondering if any of the specific surveys you did, could we pull that out and look at it just for different regions or for rural versus urban?
Well, on a couple of slides, that's why we tried to where we could. We can't get down because it's only 1,100 people. So if you divide it by county, and just because Denver's so dominant, no one county had enough that we could do it by county. Although we'd be happy to share the survey instrument with any county who thought they wanted to try to do an effort to get a bigger number from their county. We just couldn't afford that. But we did divide it at least by rural urban in some places, and we hope to get some more fact sheets out this year from that. We're running behind, but yeah, like you said, like for instance, we saw the most growing interest in Colorado awareness among the urban, but the rural people both have always been aware, continue to be aware, but their versions of local are actually tighter too than the urban area. Urban area is fine with it being anywhere in Colorado. Whereas for rural areas, they actually really want it from their part of Colorado. So that's actually good news, I think, for some of our rural areas. But the realism is that not all areas of our state can grow the same products either. So that's where it gets a little confusing, because it's like, well, if you want Rocky Ford melons, they can only come from Rocky Ford. So that's where we couldn't get that deep into it. But we do see some differences. We also see rural area folks, not surprisingly, are a little more price sensitive. Depending on the rural area, the mountain communities less, but they are a little more price sensitive because perhaps they're in jobs that aren't paying quite as well and stuff. But again, it feels like they also were less worried about processed and value-added goods. So you can keep prices down when you don't have that extra processing step. So it is varied. We just can't break it down by county at this point. But if you ever want the survey, we'd be happy to give it to you so you could give it in your region. John and then Karina, and then I probably should wrap up so we see the other speakers.
Yeah, Don, on a previous slide, you showed motivation for purchasing, and climate smart was really low. Did you happen to probe that a little bit? Is it just people aren't aware of what that is?
That is exactly what we think. That and regenerative agriculture we added for the first time in the survey because there's just new programs.
Right.
And it kind of tells us there's some education to do. The interesting thing, and I didn't include as much because this was about marketing, is that people feel ag is very, very in the mix of addressing those grand challenges. After they told us they weren't that aware of them, then they said that agriculture was important to the mix, but they admitted they weren't exactly sure how. So we posited that to the ag community as there is an educational opportunity here for CSU and Department of Ag and industry to get folks informed about where we play in the climate smart and regenerative ag spaces. But it is they're admitting it's not crystal clear to them at all yet. So that is a thing we asked for the first time, and now we're going to try to track it moving forward to see if we actually are successful. So I don't know how to use that in your branding strategy, except for, we all know there's these sustainability scorecards that people can have. We're even starting to see some branded food products actually put carbon emission estimates and stuff. I would tell you, I wouldn't be sure that a consumer would know what to do with that right now. So unless you have a way to do a pretty major educational campaign, I would stay out of that space unless it was required, because you're gonna have to be the educator because it's just not understood yet. Whereas like the economic benefits, apparently some of us have done the right job getting out the story that local could have some economic benefits because people are saying they clearly want that, they understand that. So that story is told. So that's a compare and contrast. But good question, John, and we know we're going to have to dig into that more in the future.
Yeah, I think.
Karina, and then I'll wrap up, I promise, so we can get going. Barb.
Sure. Hi, thanks. So I'm with the Colorado Cattlemen's Agricultural Land Trust. And so I'm really interested in learning how, we as land trusts can help spread this message as well as increase public awareness, because that's part of my new position here, is trying to increase public awareness about our land trust in general, but also, our role in supporting the conservation of these lands that do feed Colorado. And as I mentioned, we were working with ranchers, and so we definitely had that in with the landowners themselves. So yeah, just your opinion on how we can help spread the word.
Well, the great news is I didn't include this survey point again, but like 98% again of Colorado support wanting to keep more land in ag production. So when we're using our GoCo dollars to buy conservations, they wanted on working ag land. So this is great news for your type of project. I would say the animal industries have some challenges here. We actually had pretty good responses. As you see, people feel producers are doing a pretty good job of being watching for animal welfare. This is probably based on some of the work of my peers here at Colorado State University, Temple being the most famous. But there is some concerns about climate implications. And so I think what you guys really have as a grand challenge is that not all livestock is even created equal. So, definitely I think people unfortunately now have in their heads some confined, very dense livestock operations that they've seen that people characterize as being average. But I think you guys with Land Trust know, particularly on graze-based, livestock systems, that's where we're doing those carbon sinks and carbon capture. This is where people don't understand. And I think the livestock industry has the greatest challenge of actually explaining to them there's some lands that are good for almost nothing besides grazing animals. And because there's an economic incentive to graze animals on good pasture, you're going to have better green cover, which means carbon capture than you would have if you didn't have animals. But that is a big, long story that sometimes people won't pay fully attention to. But I think our livestock industry particularly has, if we're going to approach this climate smart thing and talk about there's different ways to raise food, we have some great examples of some of the better ways to particularly raise livestock. And again, my new colleagues here at AgNext and CSU are really trying to tackle that for sure. So anything we can do to help you use the data to frame that story, that's exactly why we do these surveys. So, and again, when I say we, this includes the Department of Ag. I just get to be the spokesperson today, but a lot of this work came out of our partners over there. So great questions, guys. She did share my email, and you're all welcome to reach out to me. And we do come sometimes and present these actually at association meetings as well, so we can go deeper into any one of the topics. But thank you for your time today, and I look forward to hearing the other speakers.
Great job and really great questions. Excellent engagement. Well, as Don said, we get to move on to the Pueblo Chili Growers Association, and we're lucky to have Danielle Kitzman here. Danielle is a proud and dedicated member of the Pueblo community. And as a longtime resident of Pueblo, she appreciates the small town hospitality Pueblo maintains while still supporting a county of over 170,000 residents. As the vice president of the Greater Pueblo Chamber of Commerce, she enjoys managing the Visit Pueblo Convention and Visitors Bureau and marketing Pueblo as a great Southern Colorado destination for tourism and business alike. As part of that role, she also acts as the administrator for the Pueblo Chili Growers Association, encouraging Pueblo chili consumption from the spicy side of Colorado and buying Colorado proud. Well, we're excited to hear from you, Danielle, especially after seeing these great data about all the work that's been done by you and your group. I turn it over to you.
Perfect. Let me figure out how to share my screen because that's the start, I guess. All right. Are we seeing the planting cycle slide? Perfect.
Looks great.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. I'm excited to share with you. When Barb called, I was like, I'm not sure what to say because sometimes I feel like we fly by the seat of our pants a lot, especially when it comes to farmers. But I guess we do have a few things to say. So I'm going to start with starting out this conversation with a pun on the planting cycle, because I feel like truly the work with Pueblo Chili Growers Association started by planting a seed. And it really was because the Pueblo chili is a unique crop to Pueblo County. It was a fun brand. It's something that is culturally ingrained here in our community and in Southern Colorado. And so it was really about taking that seed and figuring out how, we cultivate it and make it into something great that we hope that the entire state embraces Pueblo chili as Colorado's chili. And so starting with our evolution of the I'm moving too fast, of the Chili Growers Association. My first bullet point is herding farmers is harder than herding cats. And definitely that was probably the first struggle in starting with the Chili Growers Association. It was getting them all together because they're a bunch of farmers. They are very task focused and they didn't want to hear about marketing. They didn't want to hear about branding. I don't know that they knew what any of those things were. And we knew at the Chamber of Commerce that we incorporated the Pueblo chili brand into everything we were doing and talking about in Pueblo. A tagline we use is called "Experience the Flavor," and that encompasses everything from culture and history, et cetera, but also to our food and our rich agricultural community. And so we knew it was part of our story, and it was getting them to kind of come along for the ride. All of the initial members of the association were multi-generational farmers with a lot of history between each other, and so they all didn't get along very well in a lot of segments. But I think this all came along at a great time when they all had kind of adult or young adult children that didn't carry the past issues of our community or of them, fighting it out over land and water, et cetera. So we were able to kind of get most of them to agree to send their children to become board members for the association. And so we started those conversations. They all agreed that they wanted to see the Pueblo chili brand grow and to be more well recognized. And that was the start. From there, we received a USDA block grant, which really was the initial beginnings of us being able to spend some money to figure out who we were and what that brand was going to look like. We coined a Colorado Proud saying, grown with Rocky Mountain water and Colorado sunshine. And we contracted with a local artist to create the farm stand scene you see there and the circle pepper plant logo. So a local artist did that and quickly put it up on some murals around town, and people really were drawn to the local artistry of that farm stand scene. And that actually really helped us get some traction with a lot. I mean, we had people calling us for posters and stickers and things like that we were happy to see. So those were kind of the beginnings of creating that brand and kind of a community pride, really central here in Pueblo in Southern Colorado. And then we tried to start figuring out from there how we take it a step further. Some fun things that we did and focused on were getting the Pueblo chili license plate. And that actually was a lot more work than we intended. And we didn't know it was such a big ordeal and in some cases a fight, literally testifying and arguing with other legislators about why we deserved a license plate versus maybe Peaches. And I said, hey, Peaches deserve it too, go get it. But we're here right now. So we ended up getting the license plate, and it's been amazing to see that more and more of those Pueblo chili license plates throughout the state of Colorado is, I think we were worried about it. Would we even sell enough? And, would people really, want to brand their cars with that? And we've really seen that take off. So that's been great. Another fun thing we did right at the beginning was we've been fortunate to have great support, at the state level. And at that time, it was Governor Hickenlooper, and he determined he would do a proclamation for Pueblo Chili Day at the Colorado State Fair. And so that was the second Saturday of the fair every year. We've been celebrating that, and we cart out a chili roaster and fresh bushels of chili, and we give away chili wraps, a fresh roasted chili and a tortilla, and just really talk up the brand and really make it fun and light with music and, just really having a good time with Pueblo chili. So that really helped us kind of launch something from the state level at the Colorado State Fair and incorporate that brand there. So then I move into, once we had the seed planted, we had to start tending the field. So we were doing all this work with the grant. We were, trying to find fun add-on components like the license plate and Pueblo Chili Day, and, really launching into social media and paying attention to, what social media was telling us. This slide just shows a little bit of market data trends. The left slide is predicted spending index for produce and total retail expenditures for southeastern Colorado. So really knowing that produce is important, and that people, they like the story. I think they like the culture, the hominess, I guess you will, of the farm stand stories. And then the right-hand slide talks about the Hatch, Hatch versus Pueblo Chili, and of course them being a nationwide competitor. And of course they have the market share for chili. We say we're not competing with them. We say that we are a specialty pepper. We're not trying to be an everyday Hatch pepper. And so we're not actually competing, but we are obviously watching what they're doing. And I don't think that we have designs on being the next Hatch pepper, although certainly we'd love to see our brand go a little further nationwide. But we don't have the capacity, quite frankly, from the fields themselves and just that way. So it's really not about keeping up with the Joneses as much as it is about having a great specialty brand and telling a great story, and and having a great product to get behind. I think the other bottom slide talks about the Pueblo Chili and Frijole Festival, which we're celebrating 29 years this year of that festival, and it really is paying homage to Pueblo chili, but also just great produce in general. Our harvest season is amazing here in Pueblo, and you see this spike of interest that's just off the charts when Pueblo Chili Festival comes, and when we really start marketing and branding harvest season and produce in Pueblo County. You see that engagement just really peak with awareness. And I think as I was looking at this down further, where you see there's a couple little spikes in March. A few years ago, we started a Spice Up Spring campaign, and it was really focused in promoting restaurants and basically any business that had any kind of Pueblo chili component. So we were even celebrating local retailers who had, mugs and cups with the Pueblo chili brand or peppers on them, and socks. And then we were going to coffee shops that have a Pueblo chili mocha, to Pueblo chili ice cream, and then of course restaurants that are using it in recipes. And we created a recipe competition where restaurants were competing for the most original kind of gourmet recipes, showing that Pueblo chili can be elevated, not just, it's not just an everyday item. It can be, utilized in gourmet and fine dining, and really saw a lot of great engagement, and still do today. That's a consistent campaign we do throughout the year. Of course, still tending the fields, where we look at the pueblochili.org website and its data. I think what's interesting on this is pretty current, as you can tell. We have, with engagement and marketing, you've got to have money. And so of course we had run out of funds from the first grant. And you can see that, our data for Pueblo Chili Growers or pueblochili.org in particular, we haven't been keeping up with the content and freshening that as much as we'd like to. So that's something that we'll talk about in a minute of, where we're at now and for the future of Pueblo Chili. But simultaneously, Chili Festival, where that is in-house, paid for out of the Greater Pueblo Chamber. And, we've got staff that can consistently update that content and work on it. You see that the engagement from the Chili Festival side is really good and trending in the right directions with that content. So I think where maybe one isn't telling the full story or is lacking, the other one at least is helping keep up with all of those great stories. Then delving a little bit deeper from that point, I think that some of the things that we really focused on, and we heard in the last presentation, connecting food to feelings has been something that I think Pueblo Chili has done well. It's, again, about the culture and just how it makes you feel. It certainly didn't hurt us to have a friendly rivalry with Hatch. And I say friendly, sometimes it got a little ugly, but we have incorporated, we've been fortunate enough that, again, Hickenlooper helped us with some of that. Governor Polis has been amazing, where he's come down and we've called out Hatch, New Mexico, and, said, hey, we have the best chili, and in lightheartedly making fun, and just having that social media rivalry has really elevated and escalated the buzz, if you will, about Pueblo chili. And we saw surveys that came out of Durango, from all places, which we really don't have that strong of a reach, and they're so close to, you know, the Arizona New Mexico border. They get a lot of hatch chili down there. But we had restaurants that were fighting with other restaurants and consumers down there, fighting this whole battle of Pueblo chili versus hatch chili that we weren't even involved in a couple of years ago. So it was like, we're like, oh, hey, thanks guys. You know, so when you get that friendly rivalry or some kind of buzz that's unique that people can get behind, you know, it's, I think, the underdog thing too. You know, then people really started to get behind Pueblo chili and, you know, really fight for it, if you will. One of the other things that we did was farm stand promotion pretty heavily within this, within our Growers Association. We have, you know, we're fortunate enough to have this rich, you know, during season, there's 7 farm stands that are just packed with people every day, even through the week. The weekends are crazy. But what we started doing, especially when it came into August, September, and especially leading up to Chili and Frijole Festival, is we would do kind of like a live remote at the farm stands. And so really walking up to customers live on Facebook, why are you here? And it was even great to have some that were like hot from New Mexico, and we'd take video of their license plate, you know, without showing their number, of course, but you know, that we're seeing so many people from New Mexico coming up to Pueblo to purchase their chili and other fresh produce. But asking them what was important for them to visit the farm stand that weekend, and then actually talking to the farmer while he's there about what they're doing and what's unique about their particular farm stand or their business, or, you know, what they're growing. And so just little snippets of that all through social media through the month of September leading up to Chili and Frijole Festival really got people behind us. And then including that into, again, the Spice Up Spring restaurant campaigns and any of those types of features really seem to help. Also, I wanted to point out, well, then I guess moving to food farm advocacy, the question from the Land Trust. We also partner too right now with Palmer Land Trust here locally, and they've been a great partner in one of the things we did is we created a chili bike tour. You know, we got this great biking community happening, an amazing trail system and gravel biking. And we literally paired gravel bike riding out in the county land where most of our farm stands are with Pueblo chili. So they created a biking tour, and they actually do a Bike the Bessemer ditch that ties into their land conservancy and water conservancy projects, as well as, you know, promoting Pueblo chili and promoting our farmers and farm stands. So that's been a great partnership with them. They sponsor our annual association dinner, and we talk about, you know, collaboration, and they've really been able to kind of create better relationships, I think, with our farm land owners and spread their message, but also help share ours. And then we partnered on some of the marketing materials within some of their marketing pieces and educational pieces, as well as into ours. And so that's been a great way that we've collaborated. And then we saw with all of these great stories out and really this elevation of our ag community, when it comes to advocacy, we launched the Pueblo Food Project. So I say we, certainly the chamber was a big part of it, and then by proxy, the Chili Growers Association. But we were able to, from these, I think, get a good community support. We were able to write some more grants that brought us funding to kick off a food project and really look at food advocacy in our community from a much more holistic level, and food access and food desert situations. And so we've made a lot of great headway there, as well as helping to launch a lot of great new food entrepreneurs locally out of the Pueblo market that are using, a lot of them using Pueblo chili as a base inside of another product, or, you know, something entirely different, but locally based. And then we get to harvest and repeat, you know, so I think this is a constant cycle, just as the planting cycle is. We've harvested some of the benefits of all of this effort, and now we're actually in a repeat, you know, so grants and grit, you know, it's about that hard work, continuing to just plod through that consistency of marketing and consistency of branding. We wrote another grant. We're fortunate enough to receive another USDA block grant that has given us now that second boost of funding. And now we're looking at this next phase of Publichili, or the future Publichili, figuring out where and how we tell our story, and some of the gaps that we have. We know, as I referenced in the publichili.org slide, is updating that content and keeping those stories fresh, and making sure that we have the resources to continue to keep that content fresh, because we know people are looking at it, they want those products, they want to hear about it, they're visiting the website, but how do we keep them engaged and keep that fresh? The next thing is, inside the grant, our main focus now is distribution. And so it's interesting to see those slides. And we found that, most people are going to the grocery stores. And we actually have this disparity of, even though a lot of our grocery stores here, even locally, tout purchasing local produce, it is probably the hardest thing we've faced, is to get Publichili represented in Albertsons or King Soopers here locally. They will literally carry Hatch chili, and so that also inadvertently feeds that little rivalry with Hatch and Pueblo. But it actually angers a lot of locals, right? They're like, what the heck? Literally 10 minutes out of town, we've got this abundance of Publichili, and you are disgracing us with Hatch chili in our restaurant, or in our stores. And so that's been a tough nut to crack. It's just not as easy. But the other focus we have with this grant is to have Publichili more represented in commercial distributors. So the Cisco's that are servicing restaurants, and Shamrock Foods and US Foods. So we've been fortunate to get that funding. We've attended some large scale food shows where we've got these wholesalers there and talking to them. And now we're trotting through that paperwork and all of that process of how we make that happen, where we can see Publichili distributed more holistically through the state into many more restaurants. And then doing a lot of restaurant promotion more in this north end of Colorado, so certainly Denver and above, and then Western Slope, because we feel like our market penetration here, and of course Southern Colorado, is pretty widespread. So those are some of our focuses moving forward, and really just how we continue to utilize the Publichili for Holy Festival as that hinge point of celebration of this crop, and the great stories that come out of it, and how we use those throughout the year to focus on that. And then of course Publichili Day at the State Fair coming up here shortly too. And then I'll close with a save the date. If you haven't been to the Chili for Holy Festival, or come seen our amazing farm stands, and we'd love to have you come, and that's September 22nd through the 24th. So I'll close with that and answer any questions.
Excellent. Does anybody have any questions? That was a great presentation, and really exciting how much growth has been in the recognition.
Thank you. Oh, there we go. Stop sharing. There we go. Okay.
Which day, remind us, is the Pueblo Chili Day at the Colorado State Fair?
That is September 2nd or 4th. September 2nd.
September 2nd.
Yep.
Excellent. Well, I know I was really impressed by the use of the farm stand promotions that you talked about, but also the kind of friendly rivalry. To your point, it kind of creates the buzz of wanting to take a side, so it'll be interesting to see how that continues to grow your awareness and just overall businesses for your growers.
Yeah, certainly it's been interesting to hear, just from we get a lot of comments statewide that'll come to us via either social media or email, where people will literally be like, why is Hatch chili sold at Bronco Stadium? I mean, it was front page news in the paper,
Yeah.
you know, and so we're constantly talking about that market share that Hatch has, and with all, you know, they deserve a lot of respect. And it's interesting from the back end, our growers here actually collaborate quite frequently with New Mexico chili growers. And you know, we've have some great partnerships with them. So you know, certainly we want to promote and support our fellow agricultural community, no matter what state they're in. But we also don't have a problem with poking at them on social media for everybody's benefit. So
Exactly. There's room for everybody, right? And
That's right.
it gives us all those great options. So awesome. Any questions for Danielle? And certainly you have her email. It's on the slide we started with, but you can also find her at the Pueblo Chamber of Commerce. So I'm sure she'd be happy to answer any questions. Well, great. Well, let's move on to looking at the.
Oh, McLean, I think, I'm sorry, he had his hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, I mean, you might be muted.
I think you're on mute. We can't hear you.
The Zoom curse.
You could type it in the chat too, McLean, and
Yeah.
we can read it for you if you want. Whatever works for you. You sure can, or like I said, feel free to write your question or ask, you know, whatever works for you. I know sometimes. Oh, there you go. About the slide with the data around the organic industry. Okay.
Well, maybe in the interest of time, because I don't know exactly what your question will be, why don't you just email me?
Be great.
Oh, and
I think Jeff and then John, does that sound good?
Yeah, sounds good. So really a lot of what Don and everybody's been talking about has been like branding, and that's kind of what, you know, is being recognized, some of the name brand products and everything that we have in Colorado. But you know, when it comes to things like organic certification, you know, there's a regulatory mechanism that if you're claiming to be organic and you're not, you know, you can run afoul of certain regulatory bodies and there's penalties for doing that. I'm wondering if anybody's kind of looking at enforcing that kind of stuff with some of these Colorado brands. So I'll give you an example. In Fort Collins, you'll see Palisade Peach stands popping up before there are Palisade Peaches in the valley in which I live. So, you know, but then you start to dig a little bit and, well, they're not really selling them or claiming them to be Palisade Peach. You know, they're doing that kind of thing. So there's a little bit of that where if these brands start to get diluted, where they lose that integrity, we'll lose the value of that brand. I don't know really who that question goes to or if anybody has any thoughts, but it's something that I'm constantly thinking about, living in such a food driven, ag driven Grand Valley community.
Yeah, for the first time in our survey, we went deeper on Colorado Proud because in that case, it's just what you're talking about is pretty much unethical, but you know, there is no policing systems for it except for educating Coloradans that they should be suspicious of anyone selling Palisade peaches in June because those don't exist in June. But there is no real police. On Colorado Proud, though, there's even been some pushback that there's people who just set up corporate headquarters in Colorado, particularly food products, don't use any ingredients from Colorado, don't hire workers from Colorado, and just want the Colorado cachet. So we did ask about some really detailed questions in here, and as you'd suspect, people do care. So the Colorado Proud program, I think, is thinking about if what right now you sign to get a Colorado Proud license is a pretty mild agreement that something's happening in Colorado. They're thinking of making different like platinum, gold, silver, you know, because having headquarters here is something, but it's not the same as buying all your food ingredients. So they, at least with the Colorado Proud program, are at least, I think, exploring whether there should be a more developed system. But yeah, in terms of policing people who are using things inaccurately, there just really isn't anyone. But you hope you educate consumers to ask the right questions so that they quickly can figure out this person doesn't have a farm name to share with me. So it is definitely the job of the people who are doing it right to kind of water down the people who are wrong. But yeah, those stands drive me nuts too. Maybe we should just go and make their lives miserable, Jeff, and just do a road tour where like, then why are you here? Why does it say Palisade Beaches? And do like little exposés on Facebook, but I just haven't quite had the energy to do that yet. But yeah, I don't know if anyone else has a better answer, but that's why I know the conversations I've had with the CDA have been.
Well, I know from our standpoint, we've experienced that same thing. I mean, we have pepper stands that pop up that, are saying Pueblo chili and they're not. And that's one of the reasons why you'll see on our logo, so it says Pueblo Chili Growers Association on the top, and then underneath it has the ribbon that says certified. Yeah. And so we have in a lot of the marketing and branding that we did, certainly early on, we talked, it was a lot of education about making sure that they asked who the farm stand was and that it was a certified Pueblo chili grower that they were purchasing from. And then the growers incorporated all of that language within their product packaging, et cetera, as well. And with that logo, we also did some research. Again, our friends in New Mexico who've already been there, done that. They actually have the same issue, and they were finding that they had so much issue with it that they passed state legislation that made it illegal basically to maraud as New Mexico certified chili. And although, again, to your point, Dawn, what's the policing? So we actually looked at doing that similar thing and had our local legislator willing to take that to the state level. But we were like, unless you've got the mechanism in place and the funding or somehow in place to police that, it's really, what good is it for? So we figured we'd spend more of our efforts in just the education component of certified.
And at Rocky Ford, we had a trademark, and John Recker was in charge of that, as a matter of fact, trademarking Rocky Ford. And every year when we talk about Rocky Ford, we show the actual label and that it's this label and only this label, because it was actually the fact that someone else used the name Rocky Ford that really caused the huge problem back in 2011 with the listeria outbreak that had nothing to do with Rocky Ford.
That's a good point, Diane. It really helps if the growers associations like the Rocky Ford growers step in and, help with that certification process, Danielle, that you're talking about. Palisade Peaches they do not have a growers association. So I think we've all seen those peach stands just about everywhere prior to, to harvest. So I think, it does help if the growers associations really step up to try to enforce that. And with Rocky Ford, I mean, they had designated resellers, and they really stayed on top of that.
The good point is, and as Dawn pointed out, I know from our side, we certainly will have the conversation with people if we're made aware that somebody maybe is using the Colorado Proud logo in a way that it really doesn't fit for what they've agreed to. So it's a tough one, right? I know organic, that's one that's, I think, a little more regulated, especially if you're going to put it on your label and call it out. But to your point, Jeff, there's a lot, I think it's just kind of peer pressure in a way, right? Making people aware that you can't just call it whatever, using the market terms. Excellent. Good questions. John, you had one?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you, Danielle, for your presentation. I don't know if you knew this, but I was involved with the original strategic planning and putting together the growers, working with Mike Bartolo. And I just wanted to say I'd like to follow up with you when you have a chance. Okay.
Awesome. Excellent. Well, let's move on to Diane. And Diane is the president of M&C Communications, a public relations firm committed to representing inspirational people, organizations, products, and services. MNC works in all aspects of strategic communications, specializing in brand protection, insider media relations, branding, and crisis communications for clients. She has worked with clients such as the Rocky Ford Growers Association and King Soopers for more than a decade. Forecasting challenges and turning situations into opportunities is her secret sauce for brand protection, PR trademarked. Formerly, Diane was news director at Channel 7 in Denver, managing the newsroom during the Columbine shooting. As senior news editor for NBC News in New York City, she oversaw coverage of countless major stories before serving as vice president of national communications for the National Stroke Association. Wow, Diane, quite a resume there. I'm sure just a little bit of what you've done. I turn it over to you.
Thank you. And I'm so glad we started talking about I think it's incredibly important. How do you protect that brand and why should you protect the brand? And it's interesting because it really came home to me, certainly with Rocky Ford, but I was actually speaking at Cheyenne Mountain Resort in Colorado Springs about 3 or 4 years ago. And, you know, my whole world has always been forecasting and what's the next crisis and how do we prepare for the crisis. And what's interesting is I was finishing speaking at about 10:30 at night. I'm walking back, and if you've been to Cheyenne Mountain Resort, it kind of goes down the mountain, the different buildings go down the mountain. I was at the bottom. And my room, you enter from the outside. And this is important. I was wearing high heels, talking on the phone to my husband. My high heels had ankle straps. And why that's important is because I came around the corner and I ran into this guy right here. Hopefully he's going to take my thing. There we go. I ran into this guy and I was face to face with him. Can you see that? Did it come up? He was something I had never thought of before. I don't camp. At that point, I had never lived in the mountains. Luckily, I learned a lot about these guys afterwards, but I had never, and I was 10 feet from him, and he's walking straight towards me. And just like when you're in a crisis and all of a sudden it happens and you haven't already thought through it, 1,000 things were going through my mind. The first thing that was going through my mind was he was so gorgeous. I could not believe how gorgeous he was. But then this fear took over. And I'm thinking, am I supposed to get big? Am I supposed to get small? What the heck am I supposed to do here? And what I did, without even thinking, I found myself running in my 3-inch high heels that I could not kick off because of the ankle straps. And I had to actually clear 2 flights of stairs before I ended up in a parking lot, which was exactly the wrong place for me to be, because again, there was nothing for me to do. And I finally got to the next building. And I'm feeling like I'm going to have a heart attack, not only because how frightened I was, but because I don't run on top of everything else, at least not like that. And luckily he didn't come after me. But the point is here that was a crisis. Now, I have been in New York for 9/11. I covered every major crisis when I was in news forever, including Columbine. And when I am in a crisis, I stand up, I take charge, I move forward, I think about where I'm going. This is something that I had never envisioned happening to me. I think that's kind of what happened when the listeria outbreak happened in Rocky Ford. And it's what I see happen so often with so many of my clients, is that all of a sudden a crisis happens. Now, if you remember the Rocky Ford crisis, it was at that point the deadliest foodborne outbreak in the nation's history. More than almost 36 people died. It hit 14 states. And I was lucky enough to work with John on the first year of this and take his leadership as well on the marketing side, and I did the PR side. But the bottom line was that the farmers had never thought about anything happening of this nature. I mean, they had 125 years of a perfect, clean record. I mean, the fact that something they would wake up on a morning in September and hear on the news that the cantaloupe was being recalled and that these people were dying, it had this unbelievable impact on them. Some of the farmers never planted again after this time, if you can imagine. And this is their lifeblood, just like you guys. I mean, it's generations of farmers down there, right? And so what I really thought about in working with them and then going through this thing is, how do we protect our brands and how do we prepare for these crises? Because as Danielle has done in Pueblo, you work so hard to build this amazing brand. And then you wake up one morning, and in the case of Rocky Ford, it wasn't even the Rocky Ford Growers Association. There wasn't one at the time, but it wasn't cantaloupe from Rocky Ford. It was Jensen Farms, 60 miles away in Holly. And Jeff, as you said, they had a Rocky Ford sticker. And so everything came back to Rocky Ford. The CDC has it in all of their information. It's Rocky Ford cantaloupe that's being recalled. I mean, their brand was decimated, absolutely decimated. It was going to be about a $20 million impact on Rocky Ford. And the halo effect of this is, for the state, was $500 million if everything went as bad as it looked it was going to go. But I also think, very interestingly, is that Rocky Ford was just about done with the harvest, and all their cantaloupe was pretty much out. Do you know who really took the brunt of it? California cantaloupe farmers. So what's so interesting to me now is that for anyone who is producing any kind of food, they have to think about not only how safe is what they're doing, but what if there's somebody else out there who has a problem? Because when that happens, especially if it goes national, there's this halo effect that will stop people from all over the country from buying that product. And that's why it's so important that you really work to make sure that you're protecting your brand, because you've worked so hard to build it. You're so passionate about it. You love what you do. And you have to build this thing that we call the trust bucket. And the trust bucket is so important. You have to sit there and think about, what are the elements of what I have to do so that when something goes wrong, and I will tell each and every one of you, you will have some type of a crisis. When something goes wrong, how am I going to make sure that I already have the trust with my customers so that they're going to come to me to get the whole story, not just the headline, but the whole story. And that's what we really work with brand protection, is going out and figuring out how to do that. And so what would you do in this situation? How would you react? Are your employees ready? Are you ready? Are the farm workers ready? Do you know how you're going to deal with the media? Do you know who the industry organizations are who you can partner with? And just like Danielle has done so much with Pueblo, she has so many resources now if something goes wrong in Hatch, because if it goes wrong in Hatch, it's going to have that halo effect over here. And Danielle, I love the fact that you're doing the whole underdog thing, because that's the way to do it. Exactly. I mean, it shows by the tremendous success that you're having. So in brand protection PR, there are basically three things that you need to think about. The first is building customer loyalty. So how do you go about that? Do you really have your story down, and do you really know it? That's hugely important, that you know your story, and that food safety story is the story that most things will hinge on. But then right behind it has to come the history, why you do what you do, why you're so passionate about it. And it was something that we really had to teach the farmers in Rocky Ford, was that they had to continue to tell that story so that if anything ever happened again, they were ready. The reality is that in our research, the whole listeria thing is kind of in the past, and the consumers that are coming up now don't even know about it, but they've learned the lesson. And so we're still working with them 12 years later, telling the story and making sure that people know who they are and how serious they are. Now, these farmers were amazing. Before John and I even came on the scene, they already decided that they were going to build this new $1 million shed, and they were going to get every certification that they could possibly get, and they were going to have safety officers on site, and they went above and beyond. They partnered with CSU, which was phenomenal. And then we started working with the Department of Health and all these other things to reinforce how proactive they were, even though it wasn't even their issue. They were that proactive. How proactive are you? I bet you're all extremely proactive in what you do, but do you tell that story, or do you just think that's the normal course of what you're supposed to do? You have to tell it. You have to be ready, and you have to already have the elements out there. And you need to be telling it to your customers every season, because the customers change and they grow. And who was buying 10 years ago is not who's buying now. And who's buying 10 years from now, things will change. What are those stories, and how much do you care? You know, when we're talking about bringing up farm workers, how much do you care about them, and how good? This is hysterical, but one of the top posts that we had was on porta potties. It went viral about how the porta potties are put out there and how clean they are and those types of things. People care about this type of thing, and it says who you are. So you're building customer loyalty. And when you build customer loyalty, you fill that trust bucket. So when the trust bucket starts to leak at the bottom because of something that happened to you or something else that happened in the industry, people will come to you and say, tell me what's going on. And you can actually turn this crisis into an opportunity to talk about how much you've already thought about this, how much you care, what you've already invested, what are you doing? Those are the stories that need to be told, and the media loves these stories. That's the other part, is the media absolutely loves these stories. So you have a great opportunity, especially in Colorado. When you're building that trust, you know that the basic mantra is people buy from people that they know, like, and trust. They have to know you. Social media is a great way. You can also go through a number of other things. I'm going to put this up. This is, I think, a fantastic graphic that shows all the different ways that you can get your message out there. And you don't have to do all of them. So just want you to know that. It's not about doing all of them, but this is called the peso model. It's paid, earned, shared, and owned. Paid used to be something that was very, very small. Other than advertising, especially in public relations, you didn't do a lot of paid. Now, if you're not boosting, but boosting is 10 to 25 bucks a month. We're not talking a lot of money here, which is great, and you can get a really phenomenal return if you're spending your money wisely. And you're getting, the other thing is influencers has become huge. Having other people talk about you, other people who have many people who follow them, is another phenomenal way. And again, nothing that's very expensive, and also nothing that takes a lot of your time, because I know that time is many times as important as money. So it's very important that you figure out how to get that customer loyalty and how to tell your story. The other thing that I want to say to you is make sure that whoever works for you knows your story and understands your story, so that when they're asked about, oh, you work here, what about this? And what did you hear about that? They know the story and have something great to say. It's not about a ton of message points. It's not a ton of, it's more about that feeling that they're very proud to work there, but they know enough of the story that they can really give it, so that when that problem happens, you're ready to go. The second thing is insider media relations. Media relations is incredibly important. But one of the things that you get in most media trainings that I think is that you don't get, that is missing, is understanding where the media is coming from. It's not so much, here's the message points, you've got the message points, you know, here's the release, do the release. It's more of who are they and what do they want? And 9 times out of 10, if you go and you're very authentic with them, they're also rooting for the underdog. They want to tell the stories. I am sure Danielle has no problem getting media coverage down in Pueblo, because there's a tremendous pride in the state. And that pride does go over towards the media. And I will say that once the media understood that what happened to Rocky Ford was a travesty, that they were called out for something that they didn't even do, it was very easy for us to tell stories, but then it was our job to think about what are the stories we're telling and how do we tell them so that we have the most impact on the person who's watching or listening or reading the information. And that's where, for us, the health and safety story was huge. Anybody who could eat cantaloupe was eating it on TV, I can promise you that. People who mattered, who had, so the governor's eating the cantaloupe, the head of the Department of Health is eating the cantaloupe. We're doing whatever we can to make sure that they understand that the cantaloupe was safe. And don't forget, it's the best tasting cantaloupe in the entire country. So you want to back it up with that other part. So again, the safety story backed up with that pride story, that history story. It's just a phenomenal 1-2 punch that can make all the difference. Then lastly, we want to go back to talking about forecasting, brand resilience and forecasting. This is the part where I think it scares people more than anything, is sitting down, and it doesn't take more than maybe a day at the most, sitting down and thinking about all the things that could go wrong. Now, I can tell you when I go through and I do this process, that first 4 hours is pretty tough. And you can see people thinking like, oh my gosh. So it's not just a recall. It's not just a foodborne illness. It's someone dies in leadership. It's you're hacked and all kinds of stuff is going out that's not true. For you, for weather, geez, we're dealing with that right now with Rocky Ford. I mean, one of the things that we'll be talking about when the cantaloupes finally hit the supermarkets is that they're not going to be the pretty cantaloupes that you're used to seeing. They still taste fantastic, but can you imagine looking outside every day and seeing these huge hailstorms coming, and that's your livelihood? People think about that we're painting a picture for them in their heads, but we're ready for it because we know weather happens every year. You just don't know what kind. This year was a really bad year. So how are you going to tell that story and still keep your sales up, especially when your produce doesn't look real hot right now, to put it mildly? The point is that you're thinking ahead and you're forecasting. Then once you make that list, and the list should be really long, and you really need to think about all the different parts. Let's say the bottom falls out of the market. Let's say that that we don't have a soft landing here for the economy. Let's say that something goes through, and I don't know. You guys can if you start thinking about it, you'll come up with all the different things that could go wrong. I only usually plan for 3 to 6 months, which especially for a harvest cycle works perfectly. What could happen in the next 3 to 6 months that could really impact us? Now, remember, on the cantaloupe, that story broke at the end of their season, but they were told within a month by King Soopers, Albertsons, and Safeway, we will not be carrying you next year. I just want you to know they did carry them. They sold out the cantaloupe and they sold it at a premium price. So it all worked out, but it was pretty dicey for them, and as it would be for any farmer who was going through that type of situation. So you're going to make your list. You're going to think about the timing, put it happen the next 3 to 6 months, and then get rid of everything else on the list that's not going to happen within the next 3 to 6 months. So you're paring down the list. And then you're going to look at the probability, the trends, the news stories. What if they decided no more H-1B visas? What would I do in that situation? What would be the overall impact? And I want you to scale these things on a we use a scoring of 1 to 10, 10 being the most likely or the most difficult situation. And then lastly, if I do something today to prepare for this, is it really going to make a difference? There will be some things that if you plan today and you did a holding statement, which is one of the things we talk about, which is how do you write a statement that you would get out? Because remember, in social media time now, you don't have an hour if a crisis happens. You have 5 to 15 minutes before Twitter, X, whatever, Threads, wherever it is going to, wherever the journalists are going to live next, blows up. So you need to be able to move very quickly with a statement that if somebody was hurt or injured, you start with our hearts go out to or we are so sorry to hear about. And then you go to, we understand this situation has happened. And then you go to, we have a team that's working on this to get more information. And then we'll come back to you in a matter of 30 minutes to an hour with some more information on this specific channel. We will only speak to you about it on this channel, and that's posted at the top of your social media, so that anyone who wants to find more information about that knows it's the channel you go to. And then you post it on all. So if you decide that it's going to be Twitter, or it's going to be Threads, or it's going to be Facebook, and the other channels, you immediately start to make sure nothing else is scheduled, especially if you schedule stuff in advance to come out on your channels. You stop any other kind of post, and you have one person, and their job is to monitor that social media, all the channels, just to make sure nothing else is popping up somewhere else where you don't want to get, you want to get them back to where your information is going. You want to have a media list, and this is really important. When I was talking about insider media relations, one of the things that you want is one reporter. You need one reporter you have a relationship with, somebody who you keep in contact with, someone who, when you're planting, you make sure that that person gets the release that you're planting. When you're going to harvest, the first harvest, you make sure that person, you give them a call and say, would you like to come down? One person, it should be a reporter who you think is going to be around for a while, because we know it's kind of a revolving door. So somebody who you really pinpoint, someone who, it can be someone you like to watch, someone you like to listen to. It doesn't matter who it is. You need one reporter, because if you have that one reporter who knows you, then that's the person you're going to talk to in any kind of crisis first. And that's where the story is going to come out first, because they're going to, again, there's still going to be hard questions, but they're going to give you the benefit of the doubt. And then on those top 1 or 2 crises, you want to think about every question that would scare you to death, and make sure that you have already written out answers. I never want you to memorize answers, but you've written them out. They're in the back of your head. If you do these things, it won't matter what the crisis is, because you've already gone through the process and you know what you're going to do and the steps you're going to take. And when that happens and you're moving quickly, and it's not deer in the headlights where it's like, oh, geez, Louise, or in my case, Diane and the bear, where I'm thinking, what the heck am I going to do? You will be able to handle just about any crisis. And in many situations, because you are prepared and because you are organized, crisis turns into an opportunity. You end up being the thought leader, the one who has already thought through a lot of this and has taken whatever steps are needed. And that's how you protect your brand. That's how you become the person that the media go to say, well, what should have been happened here? So if it's one of those halo effect stories where it's somebody else, you become the expert on how it should be done, as opposed to your product not being sold because they heard about the story over there, and now they're not sure that they want to eat your cantaloupe, or they want to eat your chilies, or they want to eat your peaches. All that is so very, very important. And it also goes along to, if you do something where, let's say you trademark a logo, you can really talk about that fact every time, so people know that when they see your logo, they can feel safe. They can know that you have produced, and you want to be careful how you say this, but the safest possible product that's out there, and that they will continue to buy because they know you and they know your story. And that is how you protect your brand.
Excellent advice. Certainly nobody wants a crisis, but like you said, it will happen. Whatever it is, it will happen. And having a good plan can help you navigate it much, much better. Does anybody have any questions for Diane? It was a great presentation. I was just curious, how often should somebody revisit their crisis planning or just their plan on how to deal with other industry events?
I say you should take a look at it at least once every 6 months, because the world changes. From and you know, in the past 2 years, how many times have we had, whether it was the summer of violence or COVID, whether it was immigration issues, There's lots of hot issues that bubble up, and you want to make sure that you've considered those when you're thinking about how it could impact your business. And climate change is going to be another one. I mean, we talked earlier about climate change, how so much, there's a lot of work that needs to be done there. The other thing you have to be very careful on these issues that bubble up. Our country is so divided that you have to be very careful how you speak, because it's very easy to offend one half of the nation at this point. So you need to really think about and craft your words in your head so that you can talk about one side, and you have to take your own personal thought out of it, because you're going to be most likely on one side or the other, whatever that topic is. But your customers are going to be on both sides. And so you really have to think about how you're phrasing, and you have to think about what outlet you're talking to. Are you talking to NPR or are you talking to Fox News? And how are those questions going to be asked, and how are you going to answer them based on who the outlet is?
That's a good point. Because both those two are very different.
Right.
Very different news outlets. Any other questions for Diane? That was fantastic. I think. Oh, thanks, John, for putting your email in the chat so everybody can contact John. We're going to get lucky and have John on a webinar in the future. So, and I will put the link to the survey that we've touched on that was done, and that is on the ag.colorado.gov. So for all Colorado Proud members, you can find it, but I'll give you the actual link and just the path to it. So it's a little easier, because I know there's a lot of clicks along the way and sometimes it gets a little cumbersome. Wonderful. Well, I want to thank everybody. That was a great webinar and great presentations from all. Danielle, Diane, Dawn had to leave. But I want to thank everybody for joining and the great questions. Don't hesitate to reach out to any one of the speakers or myself. If you happen to misplace their email, just shoot us a note at the Department of Agriculture and we can get you in touch with them. So with that, I want to thank everybody, and our webinar in September will focus on international marketing and the work that the Colorado Department of Agriculture is doing to bring international opportunities to Colorado, which again ties into all these great brands that we have here in Colorado. There's opportunities for them to be recognized outside Colorado and outside the United States. So I want to thank everybody. And with that, I hope everybody has a great day.